Okay. Welcome to the Indigenous Entrepreneurs Podcast. Today I have Richard Rico Frias with me. He's the owner of Indian Law Firm, and he's going to be talking with us today about his business and his journey. So before we get started, if you could just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and what your business is.
Okay, so I'm Rico Frias. I am the founder of Frias Indian Law and Policy. Currently, it's a single member law firm, just myself at the moment. We're located in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and firm we've been active in business since 2017. And before I started the firm, I'd been working at the Pueblo of Pojoaque. I was chief counsel as governor, and decided I needed to go out and get some different types of experience, round out the experience that I was getting as a general counsel working there at the Pueblo. I think every attorney who wants to represent tribes could really benefit from working in-house as general counsel for a tribe, because a little bit, it's like there's what you think you're going to work on when you come into the office, and then there's what walks through the door that day, and what you very quickly have to become really knowledgeable about in order to represent your client. And so you become a really good generalist. But there were areas I wanted to expand on. So I started the practice, and I went out and I did represent a number of clients outside of Indian country, tech startup, a holding company that did a lot of logistical work, including an airline and some other things, and had a lot of work across the border with Canada. And it was a good experience. It was a lot of hustling, but it was a really good experience, and I gained a lot of knowledge that I could then bring back into Indian country. When I never stopped working for tribal clients, but I gained other experience there. And so it's been a really good experience, and I've really enjoyed having my own business and having had the experience of being sort of the boss running the legal department. When I went back to Pojoaque in 2020, I think, and owning my own business, there is something about owning your own business. It's that I find really rewarding. It's incredibly challenging at times, and following the economic ups and downs that it can have. You need to make rain at the same time as you're getting all the work done. And for myself, at the moment, all the responsibility is on me. But there's just something else about it. I decide, whatever comes through the door, metaphorically speaking, whatever work comes to me, I get to decide what I want to do. And I have some, real limits in terms of what I won't do. Yeah, and so that's been really rewarding. I don't do the primary focus of my work here is transactional work in Indian country. I don't do family law generally. Not generally, I don't do any family law. It's a hard no. And I don't generally litigate either. I think I have my feelings about. I know some people who both litigate and do transactional work, and I've known a few people who do it well, and I've known some others who, I think the tendency of litigators to want to be confrontational is difficult in negotiations. It makes it hard to come to an agreement when we're all trying to make money together. Meaning our clients, the desire to constantly be arguing makes it difficult to come to a successful resolution. That's a skill that might be needed later on down the process, but when we're first coming together in a deal, I don't find it all that useful. But it's been a really good experience. I really enjoy it, and yeah, so I'm grateful to be here. Sorry, long intro.
No worries. So what even led you to starting your own law firm to begin with? Did you ever anticipate being a business owner, or why did you get into law to begin with? Like, can you talk a little bit about that journey of what led up to you starting your own law firm?
Yeah, the reason I got into law, there's two things. I I was living in Northern California, and it's really there's a really interesting separation between the North and the South. There are some ways in which the North in California is a little more progressive, let's say, but the animosity towards Indian people in the North and towards us exercising our sovereignty is much stronger, led by people like Dianne Feinstein, and it's really discouraging. And it was I was working for state of California doing transportation surveying for their Department of Transportation. And it's just every time a tribe was trying to gain land or expand what they were doing or open a casino for economic development, there were oppositions, and it's Indians, we need to just stop this whole thing that they're separate, and just tell them what to do, and they don't know how to manage them. Just all these things that were being in the headlines, and these are all supposed to be very progressive liberal people, and it really inspired me. It was that little push over the edge, um, for the little push over the edge, to get me to go to law school, that I needed. I'd also I spent at that point I had spent, I think, I danced up at Crow Dog's Paradise for 5 years, and I heard Uncle Leonard talking to us the dancers, and the need to fight to protect Indian people. Um, and that had been settling in the back of my mind over and over and over again. How could we do it? And fight on behalf of Indian people. And I'm really book smart. My dad always used to say I have a tremendous lack of common sense, but I'm really book smart. I did really good on standardized tests. My pencil is really smart, so it drops on the right answer most of the time. And it was a skill, something that I knew I could do. I had the skills, Sam give me the skills needed to succeed in that sort of a path. And then just living up in Northern California, there's constant animosity about what goes on and how we were destroying we were ruining their way of life, right? If a tribe is gonna put a casino in the North Bay, right, we're ruining their way of life, and that's so ironic to hear from settlers. So yeah, that was that. So that was why it was that little push. This is the way I was going to do it. And I searched around, and every law school I talked to about Indian law kept referring to the University of New Mexico School of Law. And like their program wasn't as good as UNM's, but they thought it was a really good program. I was like, wow, I should really look into UNM. And half my family is from here in New Mexico. And so I looked into the program, and I came and visited. It was between here and Lewis and Clark that I was thinking of going to it. I got accepted to both schools. I actually got accepted to UC Davis as well. But Lewis and Clark has a more developed program than UC Davis. UC Davis, they teach Indian law at that time, taught Indian law every 2 years with a visiting professor. And I really wanted to focus on Indian law. So UNM was the perfect choice for me. ASU also has a really good program. I just didn't want to live in Arizona, so I never even thought about applying there. Um, and right out of and I mean, it was the perfect place for me. It's very collegial between professors and law students. I was an older student, so for me, law school was not intimidating in the way it was for some of my younger students. I'd had other life experiences, and so yeah. And when I got out, I interned 2 summers with the Indian Gaming Association, and with Chairman Ernie Stevens, and at that time the executive director was Mark Van Norman. And one summer, Mark was kind of pulled me aside, asked what I was looking at taking, and gave me some advice and said, the Indian law classes are great, but there's some core issues that you need if you're going to represent Indian country, and you really need to take business association. Actually, it was my first summer. You need to take business association. You need to take secured transactions, and gave me a list of things that he said, you really need to understand these to represent Indian tribes, because we need lawyers that are knowledgeable in all of these things as well. So I would adjust your plan to make sure you include these. And he was right on. I really appreciate that advice, and it was helpful. And um, business associations just lit something in me. I found it really fascinating, um, in a way that I didn't expect to find fascinating. Um, as someone, I was a strange kid, and my best friend was similarly strange. And I read the Communist Manifesto when I was 12 and followed it up by reading Capital. And I'm not going to like lie to you and say that I understood all the concepts in that. Um, and then went on and started reading a lot of anarchist philosophies like Mikhail Bakunin and Emma Goldman and things like that. And that had been really my political leaning. But I really enjoyed business associations, took a seminar class from the same professor talking about the Enron scandal. And that sort of passion and interest in business and economic development, which is something that we so desperately need in Indian country. There's a little bit of a cognitive dissonance in the brain between the part of me that really loves the business law and the part of me that's still a socialist. But I really enjoy it, and I really enjoy, helping tribal enterprises be successful. I really enjoy, and a lot of what I do actually is with tribal entrepreneurs, and I really enjoy working with entrepreneurs. It is kind of going back to my comment about family law. I find that the energy of the people I'm working with, like their overall, like their feelings and what they're dealing with, in family law can be so, not always, but it can be really negative, right? And one's angry, they're fighting. I don't want to be around that. Not on day in, day out. It's not the way I want to make my living. Um, but with entrepreneurs, they tend to be really excited about whatever idea they have and whatever it is they're working on. And you get swept up in that excitement with them. I just had a meeting with a potential new client, I think last week. And they're just really excited about the opportunities to expand and partner with more tribes. And I get excited about it and sharing, knowledge that I brought from my years doing construction work that is relevant. And I just enjoy that. And even if it's an area that I don't know much about, I had a client that did a quality control program for cannabis cultivation, or a colleague, I should say. We never formally worked together, but we talked about what he was doing, and we knew each other for a long time, and we both worked for the same client for a while. And he was just very excited always about what he did, and so bringing that into your work life, it's not like going to work. I enjoy my clients, I enjoy who I work with. And so it's not like going to work in the morning, right? Not like when I was going out on the highway for Caltrans, and there's that sense of dread every time you're pulling over and you've got to go grab the cones and you're hoping you're going to make it back into the truck. This is very different, and tribal entrepreneurs is something that is sort of a missing component, I believe, in Indian country. I talked about this, with the staff back when I was executive director at NAFOA, the American Finance Officers Association, that we have the tribal government and the tribal government-owned enterprises, but the entrepreneurial class in Indian country, it's more and more. Their tribes allow tribal members to form LLCs and other entities under tribal law. And I think the more we can encourage that, the more we will build in a really important piece of our economies. Thinking back, I think it was the last economic impact report that IGA did before I left in 2014. I left because my wife, Carrie Frias, who's also an attorney, had gotten an opportunity to come work at the Pueblo of Pojoaque, and that was going to bring her back to New Mexico. And well, obviously 10 years before the pandemic, and remote work was not as common then. And so it meant I had to leave. And so that's why I did, because otherwise IGA was a great place to work, and a great organization. But this economic impact report, it talked about something like 80 cents on every dollar immediately left Indian country. It didn't circulate. And my number may be wrong there, but that's how I remember it. And I believe like the minimum that you want it to circulate is 3 times. And the more you can circulate it in your local economy before it goes out, the better you are, because then it just keeps like it's trickling down. So if the more we have tribal entrepreneurs, if we can have tribal members who have a company and they're cleaning all the linens from the hotel, or they have a beverage, right, company, and they're delivering all the sodas to the C store, to the hotel and the casino, then they're hiring employees, and they're potentially, right, if you get a large enough base, they can be paying taxes to the tribe and creating a tax base, and they can be filling in this large gap that exists in our economies, right? And then also, instead of us all looking up, let's say, to the tribe for jobs and other opportunities on reservation, there are other entities, that can grow and be providing those opportunities and provide more opportunities for tribal members to stay at home. And so I think it's a really important part of economic development in Indian country. So I like, not only do I enjoy it, but I think it's important work helping these young entrepreneurs, or not always young, actually. A lot of times they're closer to my age, but they have an idea, and they and they're they want to see it fulfilled, and helping them determine the right entity type for themselves, and get set up in a way, help them do everything and make sure they have everything lined up if they're seeking investment, whether from traditional form or from angel investors or VCs. There's a dearth of that kind of investment in Indian country. I think it is growing, but it's just not as the money is not there like it is for other segments of the population. It's good work, and it's important work, I think. And the more we bring small businesses into Indian country, the more our economies will grow, and the more we'll start attacking some of the other issues as well, like employment and such.
It's really interesting because you're an entrepreneur and a business owner yourself, because you own your own law firm, but you work in a space that a lot of entrepreneurs need help and guidance in, which is like business law, intellectual property. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about what you've observed, like working with these different businesses, and where things are a little bit more challenging, I guess, when it comes to like starting a business on Indian country, and how businesses have been able to maybe navigate that, or areas you see like where maybe a change needs to be made, or where something is being done well. Can you speak just a little bit to what you've observed through your work with entrepreneurs?
Absolutely. I mean, my kids tease me. I don't speak a little bit on anything, but once I get going, I tend to be long-winded. But no, absolutely. I think one of the biggest hurdles that I see in this area is that, like when they talk about startups, and they talk about like the investment, sort of the way it goes, right? There's the friends and family round and angel investors, and then moving on to VCs. And for me, the friends and family round was my college education, right? That was it. That was all there was. And I'm not saying that begrudgingly. I'm very grateful to my parents for the sacrifices they made, for where I was able to go to school before I went to college, and for supporting me through college. My dad grew up in Watts, and my mom lived for a while in the projects in East LA, and mainly lived over in that area. And they both dropped out of school early to support their families. My dad at 15, 14, my mom around 14, 13, and then went to work, and never went back to school. My dad went back to high school, finished high school. My mom never went back, read constantly, but never went back for formal education. But they emphasized education with us. So that was it. That was like the sum total, right? There's not friends and family round for me to go if I wanted to start a business and say, hey, I need $50,000 to start a business. Those kind of funds just aren't available. And I think that's common. And so what is lacking a lot of times for what tribal entrepreneurs need, is just support for getting advice, right? What is the right entity type for them? What people talk about, a sole proprietorship, which is a fancy way of saying that you don't really have a business. It's just you and a fictitious business name doing business as. But there's no structure between you and it. Um, with and there's partnerships and there's limited liability companies and there's corporations and what are the differences, and there's the entity that people talk about as an S corp, which is just a corporation, but could also be an LLC that's elected to be treated a certain way for tax purposes, right, under subchapter S of the Internal Revenue Code. But that doesn't really change the underlying structure of what the entity is, and so there's a lack of support and funds in this area to help entrepreneurs, and especially in terms of intellectual property. I'm not an intellectual property lawyer. My wife is, but it's really I know a little bit about it, but not enough. Like I'm not filing anybody's trademark or anything like that. Um, but I know it's really important, to protect your brand early on, right? In my experience, it's really hard for tribal entrepreneurs to have the funds to be able to do that. You can, when I was young, years before I went to law school, I formed a nonprofit group of Native guys in the Bay Area that wanted to, raise money to help support Native women and children who are survivors of domestic violence. And I filed a trademark, and I managed to get both processes. I formed the entity. I got the tax exempt status, and I got the trademark. It's probably a sign, things to come. But when you're on your own like that, the trademark, was it? And now I'm forgetting the acronym. Patent and Trademark Office, they help you a little more, but it's still a process. And it helps to have someone who's really knowledgeable what all the different classes are. I remember, coming home from work and looking at all these different classes and trying to identify which one we were actually going to be in, and understanding the difference between a membership mark and a service mark and a trademark, and what are all these things, what do all these terms mean. And then we got an objection from some fancy law firm in Manhattan on behalf of a sports team that didn't like what we were using. And we got to talk to this guy. And I wasn't a lawyer, I was swinging a sledgehammer. Entrepreneurs really need this legal help, and if there was, it's an area where I think we really could use more assistance available for tribal entrepreneurs to be able to talk to a lawyer, get help filing their trademarks, get help determining what's the structure that is most appropriate for them. And that's one big hurdle, is that they just don't have the funds to be able to get the services that they need. And I do everything I can to be able to work with people. I really do. And sometimes it's just not possible. So that's definitely one thing. On another side of it, just something that I will just toss in here is somebody, I am a lawyer, I'm a business lawyer. They don't teach us anything about running our own shop really in law school. They have some programs for after you graduate, like my law school does. I think they initiated those after I had left, but they don't really teach us how to run our own firms. And they don't do, I love UNM School of Law. It's great. My professors were great. I had a great experience there. I actually asked if I could do a fourth year, and the dean at the time was Kevin Washburn. And he said, "You've got to go." He said it nicer than that, but basically it came down to the bar says, ABA says you can only have so many credits, and you're close, and we need space for other people. And you got to go. I'm like, but there's all these great classes and more things to learn. I really love studying the law because I just didn't find it stressful. Like it just wasn't that stressful, and so. But they don't teach us how to run our own businesses. And a lot of my class went out and they hung out their own shingle. There's so much we don't know about running a business. And I think that's something that we should emphasize. And UNM has a great clinical program. It's often recognized for its clinical program. So we do get actual experience in the real practice of law, not just on the theory. But I think law schools could do a better job of that. And then I remember there was an organization here in Santa Fe. I don't remember what the name of it is, but they'll meet with entrepreneurs and they'll suggest resources and things like that. I was a lawyer, so the kind of things that they suggested to me, I already knew about, right? Filing and everything that was involved in setting up my entity. One of the, which going back to your original question, one of the biggest things that I've seen for people who go and um they choose to start an LLC and then they're going to form their business and that's it, is that they file their articles of organization, they get their business license, um, they open a bank account, and then they're done. And if you're a single member, I think you can get away with that. I would still recommend that you need an operating agreement. I think it's really important. An operating agreement helps to say how you're running this business and helps to create that separation between the two of you as two different legal entities. But if you're a multi-member, you really need an operating agreement, and you really need a good operating agreement that lays out what happens. It's kind of like a prenup, right? What happens when the honeymoon is over and there's starting to be difficulties, and how do you wind everything up and who gets what and everything. And I've run into so many businesses that don't have it, and then they begin working with me, and I recommend it. And if they want to do it, I'll draft them an operating agreement. Because it is really important. I've seen, I've seen over and over, where everybody thinks they have a really good idea, and a lot of them are really good ideas, and sometimes even if you have the best idea in the world, it just for some reason it doesn't survive. And so how do you wind everything up? How do you take care of everything? Or you have one member who's just not pulling their weight. How do you get them out? And if you, for New Mexico anyways, if you rely upon the statute, the Limited Liability Company Act, it doesn't provide that for you. You don't have the mechanism to be able to do that like you would have if you had a lawyer draft that for you and put that in. Something that I always have in there, that there are ways of removing people, because I've seen it over and over again. Just things don't always work out. And you need, so it's, if you have a mechanism, then everything can kind of be disentangled amicably, right?
What are some things that, like, if a business listening right now, what are some things that you could work with them on for their businesses? Like, what type of law services and advice do you offer through your law firm?
If they're an existing business, right? I would say, we do a lot of general counsel work, right? We'll just general representation, right? I'll review contracts for them, help them negotiate the agreements, make sure that it's in their favor, make sure that there aren't any sort of hidden provisions in there that are really not in their best interest, that are really down the line going to perhaps end up taking away some of their control. That's definitely one. I've advised clients when they were taking in investment and things like that, and how that investment was could potentially lead to them losing control of the entity. As you get more and more diluted, it get to a point where perhaps you no longer have the majority, and you no longer have control over the entity. So that's something to be mindful of. And there are ways of setting things up that you don't necessarily have to give equity to give something of value to an investor. You can make it look and taste very much like equity without it actually being equity in the company, giving a say in the operation of the company and things like that. But I do think it is really important to have someone experienced looking over contracts, especially whenever you're in a position where you're dealing with someone who's much bigger, because they have their attorneys who are looking over it, and I've just seen some very strange provisions at times in contracts that I was able to call out and say, like, I wouldn't do this. This is a really bad idea, and just help them to avoid making some mistakes. Even things that seem like they're going to be really simple, like a commercial lease, right? A lease for commercial space, as opposed to just renting a house. There are provisions in there that are different. and sometimes it doesn't make good sense, right? It doesn't make good business sense to enter into the agreement, you know. I don't do intellectual property, but I can definitely make referrals to people who are really qualified in that area and help people get those protections and well. And I know enough to be able to explain to them why it is important early on, especially as they're getting more and more successful, why they want to protect their brand early and not 10 years in, where they've got so much invested with their brand and everybody knows them by this brand. And it and so it's just so important to protect it and make sure that you have it protected, but not just a trademark part of it, but maybe you have just to kind of put it like one of the a friend of mine who has a business, he had a food business, and we were talking about as he was looking for investment, the need to protect his recipes, right? That his recipes were unique. It's part of what made him so popular. Was that just the taste and the texture and the quality of the food was really important, and protecting that. And making sure that didn't get sort of siphoned away. And this sort of in the way that like it's a trade secret, right? In the way that the formula for Coca-Cola is like a famous example of one that is really carefully guarded. Protecting that kind of information, protecting yourself when you're entering into negotiations by having a well-structured NDA, you know, is also important as you go out and you start meeting with people and you start talking with them. You want to make sure that everything that you're protected, that you can share information so you can see if there's a fit, if this is a good opportunity. But you want to make sure that your confidential information remains your confidential information, and that all copies come back or are destroyed depending on your preference. And these are all things that I do regularly with my clients, and help them get things ready if they're looking for financing, make sure they have everything that they need to be able to seek, you know, whether it's bank financing or something else. So, and if it's somebody who wants to like have a business, you know, then definitely I can counsel them on what makes sense in terms of which way to go forward, you know. And it's like, because I work with both for-profit and non-profit businesses, and so if you're going to do a non-profit, it makes sense to form a corporation, to have a board, find board members, and you know, I'll help them draft all of that. But if you're a for-profit business, you know, oftentimes, and it's just going to be a single member, a single person, oftentimes the LLC form is just it's simpler, provides the protections they need, easier for them to set up, and you know, it's a better way to go. I do more of that than I do of other entities.
One question that comes up a lot with the work that we're doing is tribal entrepreneurs aren't really sure what the best structure is for if they're starting their business on the res. Like off the res, it's not as, I mean, it's a little less clear, I guess, what the best structure is for on the res. I'm wondering if you have any advice or thoughts for businesses who are considering like registering their business with their tribe and running it off of their tribal land versus off, because I know there's a lot of nuances there and different things they have to navigate.
I mean, the first thing I would say is if it's possible for them to register their business with their tribe and they're going to be working on their reservation, then that would be my go-to, right? You're going to avoid state taxation. It's just a better way to go, as opposed to if you go and register an entity with the state, right? Even though you're working there, your state chartered entities, they're still going to be looking for their taxes. New Mexico's going to be gross receipts. For a lot of businesses, I really do believe most of the time the LLC form is going to work for them. And that's a very, very broad generalization. It really depends on what you're doing, how many people are involved, and when you can make an LLC extremely complicated, and have like a board of directors and the whole 9 yards. Um, a lot of times, though, it's not that it is much more like a partnership, and the LLC does borrow some of the aspects of a partnership, but provides a limited a liability shield like a corporation. And so it's kind of the best of both worlds, and it's simpler for them to operate, and it most of the time it seems to I'm sorry, my dog is having nightmares. If you can hear that. It most of the time it ends up being the best choice for people. Uh do whatever they want, but a lot of the time that's what we end up going with. That's what I end up forming for them. Um, but I do think the bigger thing is if it is possible to do it through your tribe, and you're going to be working, especially if all your work is there, the tribe, you live at home, do it there. Um, it, 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 it's such a benefit, right?
Kind of to build on that question and like this topic of, tribal entrepreneurship and starting and running a business on tribal land to kind of keep the dollars within your community. What are some of the benefits that you see, like if we continue to support like individual business ownership? Um, do you see benefits regarding like economic development or anything that you would advise like tribes who want to support businesses to do?
Yeah, I mean, understanding how differently situated tribes are. Um, I mean, here in New Mexico, even just we have such a diversity, right? A diversity of whether they have economic development, how much economic development they have, how much economic development they actually want, how much they want uh, uh, people coming to the reservation for business purposes. Um, but one thing I would say is if they're open to the idea, if they want to have more economic development. Um, I do think it's important, you know, it's a real benefit to the community, or it could be a real benefit to the community to provide some startup assistance for businesses. Because when these businesses are successful, when they're growing, like um, I, I know a young individual works at his Pueblo and has a cleaning business, and he uh, all his I think no, not most of his employees are all tribal members. He does all of his work. He cleans buildings and offices there on his reservation, and so he's not only is he, you know, he's somebody, right? He's got a job. He's supporting himself. He's not needing assistance. He's employing other people, and as this business grows and the more it is able to grow right within the reservation economy, the more people he can employ, um, and that's a benefit overall for the whole community. That the more is where he works is north of Santa Fe here, which is an area that historically is very difficult to create jobs in. So as we allow this and encourage this, and we're creating jobs, we're solving an issue of employing our tribal members. So the more we encourage it, the more we support it, and the more we help uh, people open businesses and employ other tribal members. Um, the tribe is taking some of the load off of itself, I would say, right? And then down the line, if we have right a large enough economy of tribal business owners um, on the reservations, then we begin to create that tax base that we all know is missing in Indian country. And we're many, many years away from that, but uh, we get there eventually. Um, it's just an important part of our economies, I think.
Kind of shifting back to like your business and your law firm, what are some like challenges that you've encountered while starting up your own business, and how have you kind of overcome that?
The, I think, I was starting a small business and um, I wanted to support another local business. So when I went to open up my bank account, I went to the local, not savings and loan, a credit union. Went to a local credit union to open my bank account. And the second time they sent me away with a new list of things that I needed to be able to open my bank account. I should have just given up on this idea and gone somewhere else. Um, it took 3 or 4 trips with the different list of things that they needed from me because it's an obsessive habit. I take notes whenever I have conversations with people, and so this list kept changing. Um, and which is strange because banks tend to be they're formulaic in what they do, right? They wanted my operating agreement, so I gave it to them. Right? They wanted a copy of my operating agreement. It's like 32 pages long. Um, they approved me in I don't know 5 minutes once they had everything that they said that they needed. So I know they didn't read the operating agreement. It was just a box to check on their form list. Um, and so that was a little bit of a struggle because you need a bank account to be able to do business and be able to go out and do anything. It 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 and then down the line, it was similarly hard to work with this institution. Unfortunately, it just was really just difficult. And I ended up having to shift over to a larger financial institution. And I think sometimes the decisions we make early on, it's really important who we're partnered with and who we're working with, and that we have partners that can actually support us on our journey as entrepreneurs. Um, Similarly with taxes, right? You need to have somebody who really understands what you're doing, understands the type of entity you have, um, and can provide you advice as you're making decisions down the line as your business is growing. They can take the journey with you. I have um, a CPA I use now. She's native. She's Navajo. She's amazing. Um, I have no plans to change that. We Over the years I've used different people, and she's amazing. She knows so much. And so every stage along the way, as we've been working with her, I think we've been working with her a few years now, um, she can advise us on, what we're doing and from that side of things. And it's really important. What are the tax implications of this? And it's really important. I know a little about taxes. She's an accountant. She knows more than I do. Um, there's uh, that's not the primary focus of my practice. Um, and it is just really important to have that advice early on. Um, for and so and but to, for a young for an early stage entrepreneur who is thinking about getting started, right? I think talking to somebody about what form, talking to an accountant about what the potential impacts could be, whether you do want to set it up right from the beginning, right? File the election. I think it's Form 2553 to be treated as under Subchapter S, right? As what they call an S corp. And then you've got to pay yourself a salary, right? A legitimate salary, and are you going to be able to shoulder that burden? Are you not going to be able to? Is the income going to be coming in sufficiently to be able to pay yourself? Um, so um, that's that is like like I think those are two areas where I really look to make sure that I had qualified people who could advise me on what I needed to do early on in my journey and have an understanding of what these different things mean and understand, what it means to do profit and loss and the benefits of investing in some sort of accounting software so that you can keep track of everything. And so that when it comes time, you want to get investment, you want to go get a bank loan, you can print out the reports that they want to see on your business as opposed to, you've got to transcribe it from a notebook where you've been keeping it in. And, but those were areas I think were growth areas over the life of the business. Um, and I think just having a really good um, accountant who both keeps the books and then helps with the taxes is really uh, that's fantastic.
So you we talked a little bit about like what you can do with entrepreneurs who, if they need legal consultation, how they can work with you. What are some other areas of law that you work with in primarily through your law firm?
Well, I guess like one of the things I'll say just sort of first off is I also work with like I also do we've got several clients right now that I'm working with where they're acquiring the assets from another business, whether all of them or a small portion of them. And that's something I do, you know, sale and purchase of assets. And then I do a little um occasionally I will delve into probates. I mean, I've done it before and I don't do it that often. Um, but I occasionally do probates in Indian country, help people, you know, where someone has passed and they need to go through the process, and I'll help guide them in that way. Another thing I do is I'll also work with because I think it's important. I'll work with non-Indian businesses and help them understand how to do business in Indian country. Still in the business law arena, but a lot of times, non-Indian businesses they just don't know how to go about it. And oftentimes they're working with attorneys who are not from Indian country and don't understand Indian law and think that it's like going to be simple for them to like add on. And Indian law is not simple at all. It's complex. It's really complex, especially when you get into the jurisdictional issues. And um, I had a client early on that hired me to draft a document for them, and I talked to them, and I draft this agreement. And they were going to be working on tribal lands, and they I don't know what they said, but they changed the document before they gave it to the tribe, and I don't know what they said to the tribe, but they got kicked off and asked never to come back. And I don't, so whatever they said, it wasn't good. Um, it and I find that people have a lack of understanding about tribal courts. Um, and it's just like tribal courts are as varied as tribes and as varied as state courts, and judges are human beings, whether they're tribal judges or whether they're state court judges. And you can, and there's no guarantee just because this person has to robe on that they're Solomon, right? And everybody has a bad day. But the tribal courts that I've worked in and worked around and worked with have been, I would say, right, as fair, as competent as any state court in New Mexico or anywhere else that I've been, right? Um, and so it's a mistake for companies to believe, right? I'm not saying they all believe this, but for a non-Indian company to believe that they can't get a fair opportunity to be heard in a tribal court. I would just think that would hands down be a mistake. And to turn away from allowing for tribal court jurisdiction when you're going to be working on tribal lands. And so, and these are the kind of things that when I work with non-Indian companies that want to do business in Indian country, the things that I talk to them about, get them to understand that like this is what they're going to want. They're going to want you to go to their court because you're on their land. And just kind of help them understand the process and how to work. But the one thing that I always tell them right at the very beginning is I'm not in the business of I'm not in the business of suing tribal governments on behalf of non-Indians. That's not what I do. It's not what my practice is here for. I've represented tribal members in disputes with their tribal governments, but I think that is a absolutely 100% a different category of goods altogether. We all have a right to representation against our own government. An outsider against a tribal government, I'm just not interested in doing that work. I don't like to litigate to begin with. It's not my favorite thing. And I'm not here to do that. And I just make that very clear. You get to that point, you're going to have to find somebody else to do it. I won't do it. But I there's a lot of non-Indian countries do business in Indian country, and helping them understand how to do it well, how to be a partner, a real partner with Indian country is important. And then one of the other things that I do is help. There's a new law that it's not new, but it's coming into effect, right? Entities that were formed prior to the start of this year have to, for-profit entities, have to file information on, or the beneficial ownership information with the federal government, with FinCEN. And I've been helping companies do that, understand, what's involved, and what they're asking when they're asking the questions, um, and help them make sure that they're in compliance with, with this law, and before the reporting deadline of January 1st, 2025. So it's another area that I work with. Most of what I do is always centered around businesses. I like it that way. It's what I enjoy doing. I don't get too far afield too much. It's just, this is just what I enjoy, but no family law, absolutely across the board. I don't want to do it.
So just business law, different business situations or that people come up with, they can come to you or to potentially work with.
Yeah, or I can help individuals, right, if they need power of attorney or a simple will or things like that. I'll help with those things. But otherwise, and I can do probates, and I do do probates when they come in. I've done a number of them over the years, but mainly what I do is all business oriented and business related. And that's, yeah, you've got an idea, it's something that you want to, you think you can make be successful, and you want to know how to get started. I always do free consultations, and I let them know what I think, and give them some guidance, and hopefully I like to think that after the consultation's done, they're a little better informed. And if they want to move forward and engage me, I'm always open to that. But sometimes they don't. Sometimes they go somewhere else, or they go think about it some more. But yeah, I always, you've probably picked up on, I'm a little chatty, and I enjoy talking to people, and sometimes my consultations run way past the 30 minutes they're supposed to go. But I like talking to people, and I end up spending probably way too long talking to them about what they want to do, and it just, I like helping people too. So it just, it feels good. I really enjoy the law. I really enjoy being a lawyer. I wish, in some ways I wish I'd done it sooner, except for I wouldn't have met my wife in law school, and that would have been a tragedy. So, we've got 3 beautiful kids, and yeah, so I did it at the right time. But I really do enjoy what I do, and it's a great career. And it's just, it's lovely. And I never looked back from founding the business in 2017. At the beginning of the pandemic, when I was asked if I wanted to go back and work for Pojoaque, I did go back in-house for them. And that was a good experience. I enjoyed it. It was good to be there again. But I did miss my, having my own business, and that there's definitely like flexibility that provides. I take the kids to school in the morning. I pick them up. I work nights. I work weekends. I make up my hours in other ways. But something, there's an emergency. I don't have to worry about who's going to go get them. I go get them. I'm there.
That leads perfectly into what my next question was going to be, is what's your favorite thing about like being an entrepreneur and owning your own business? Like, how has it impacted your life?
The flexibility is really important, right? I have responsibilities to my clients. I have duties to my clients. And I have to manage the rest of my schedule, sometimes around those duties. But most of the time, and this is like the great thing about working in Indian country too, is that every now and then my littlest person will wander over, or is in the background. I'll get on a business call and with a client. I'm like, I'm really sorry. My kid is home from school. You may hear him, where he may wander across the camera behind me or whatever, and it's never, it's never a problem. It's like, oh, I totally get it. Family first. And it's never ever been an issue with my tribal clients. Never, ever, ever. But I always let them know, they're here. They may yell for me from their room, because they need water, or they need this or that, or they're sick again. And, that's a great thing. But I do like the flexibility to be able to be there for my kids. I know, for my father, after he finished his high school at night school, he started to take some college classes, but realized he was missing us growing up. And so he stopped and decided that he was going to invest in us because he was missing that. And I've been lucky, having my youngest is born in 2017. Just a year, I opened the business officially. I filed the paperwork in 2016, but I actually opened it in 2017. And so I was able to rock him to sleep on his naps, which is a lot of fathers don't get that opportunity. I might have spoiled him a little bit because I would hold him for the whole nap because it was just such a special experience, holding your baby right there in your arms while they sleep. I wouldn't give that up for anything. And that flexibility, that to me, I'd rather work till 1 and be able to be there in their lives, all those things, and not have to miss them. Sometimes you still miss them because you have to travel or you have to go somewhere and there are meetings you have to attend. But I think overall I miss less, and I've been there more from the flexibility that's available to me, having my own business. And that's, I mean, I've told this jokingly, but it's true. Like when I first started, I was working at a office space that I made in my garage. And in the wintertime, it's cold here in Santa. And so I could only type about 30 minutes and I have to come in and warm my hands and go back out there and type another 30 minutes and then come back in when I was working at night, just trying to get things done for clients. That flexibility is really important. I grew up in a single income home. My mom was able to be home all the time. There's always somebody there. And I work from home so that I don't have to pass the expense of an office on to my clients. And so I'm always here. I'm always available. Sometimes I may have to finish a meeting before I can go get the kids, but someone's going to be there and going to go get them. And that's been good. That's been good. It's been, I think, important for them, their sense of confidence and feeling cared for, to know that. And for a while, Carrie and I were both here working together, and so they knew, we were there. So that's been really important for our family life. I wouldn't change that for anything. I just enjoy it.
Yeah. One last question, is for anyone listening who has maybe started their business, but maybe are kind of hitting some walls with it, or someone who hasn't started their business, but they have an idea, but they're a little afraid to take that leap. What is a piece of advice or any words of wisdom that you would like to share with them, from your experience?
I'll answer it in reverse if that's okay. If you have an idea and you want to go out and you want to do it, I would suggest that you begin laying out the pieces of what you need to do to make that be successful. Especially if, say, you're working somewhere and you're drawing an income and you have that support at the moment, right? I'm not saying, I'm not going to say, let's just sneak off and get some materials and bring it and stick it in the garage. Not saying that, but after work, acquire the things you need to get started. Like, start making a plan for when you're going to get started. Pick a date, aim for that date. You may have to move it back a couple of times, but start laying the groundwork now for your business, whatever it may be. Form the entity. If you're going to start it, if you're going to start your business in 2025, January 2nd, file with the Secretary of State. Get your entity, have a consultation with a lawyer who can help you, especially if it's in a specialized area, who can give you some advice on what you're going to need to do, and then go do those things. Once you have the entity, you can start a bank account and you can put seed money in that. So you have that ready, and just get everything together and save so that you have some backup, because you're going to need it. And be prepared that there will be bumps. There will be bumps, and that when you actually walk out the door and you're suddenly working for yourself, it's also just intimidating. And be prepared for that feeling. Just understand that's natural. You may not make every sale if you're in a sales business, but eventually you're going to get in your track, you're going to get your rhythm, and it's going to go. And just be prepared to hang in there through the hard times, through when it feels like, wow, this is really hard. It's harder than I thought it was going to be. Just stick with it and just keep going and going and going and going. And because that's the only way to be successful. And if you have an existing business and you're and you're running into hurdles, seek advice from someone who might be able to help you. If it's like you're making sales and but you're not making any money, you might have too many expenses. You might need to look at like your price point may be too low. You may need to go up. Or you may have unnecessary expenses that you need to curtail so that you can be successful, or it may be other things altogether. But and sometimes it's just a matter of sticking with it to get through those hard times, especially the lean times. I know in my business that between mid-December and mid-January, it's going to be slow. And so I just plan for it, and I plan my work around it, and I have as much as I can to carry me through. And but I just know that is a slow period for my business, and so I don't let it worry me. And then I pick up, and I know there's going to be a lag. You'll learn those rhythms down the line, but the first time you hit, if you're in a business where you have that kind of seasonal lull, first time you hit it, it feels like that somebody cut the lines on the elevator, right? But you got to hang in there, and sometimes you just have to double down and keep moving. And then don't be afraid in both cases, don't be afraid to use the context that you have. Oftentimes, one of the most valuable resources you have are the people you know, and reach out to them and talk to them. I have a network of friends. Some of them are entrepreneurs like myself. And some of them are not, but like, I reach out for advice and get it, and we move forward. And it's, we oftentimes we help each other and refer clients for different things. And, but your network of contacts is an invaluable resource. Sometimes just for someone to say, no, I think you're gonna be all right. Just keep going. Sometimes you just need to hear that from somebody else, right? This is just normal, especially from somebody else who is an entrepreneur and has been through it, right? I have a friend who has been a business owner much longer than I have, and like, you just got to stick with it, Rico. You got to keep hustling, and that was what I needed to hear, and to keep going through the day.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time and for sharing some of your wisdom and stories with us. I might reach out to you in the future to talk about some other topics, maybe like specifically operating agreement, like just talk about that, or the Buy Indian Act, stuff like that. If you'd be interested in talking more specifically on some, I think, topics of interest for entrepreneurs that you are knowledgeable in. But thanks for coming on for this first episode to share your story about your business. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. Really enjoy talking to you, and thanks for having me. And I hope it's been informative and entertaining for your audience. And I like listening to podcasts while I drive or something, so I hope I can get to their destination safely.
Yeah, definitely. No, and we'll link like your website. And I think there were a few other, like Amber's website, as resources for people to look at.
Amber is fantastic.
Yeah. So if people need if they want to have a consultation with you, I'll link that too, so that they can easily just like access it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.